I gathered all my courage to confess my feelings to her, but she said, "Why didn't you say sooner?" The night I finally decided to tell her how I felt, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone into the river. I stood on the old pedestrian bridge downtown, the one with chipped blue railings and faded love locks hanging like forgotten promises. The city hummed beneath me, cars rushing home, distant laughter, a busker playing a soft guitar tune that sounded like courage I hadn't yet found. I had rehearsed this moment for years, but now that it was here, every word felt fragile. My name is Daniel, and for the longest time, I believed silence was safer than honesty. I met Emma on a rainy Tuesday morning at a community food pantry. I had signed up to volunteer after my father passed away. Grief has a way of pushing you toward people when you least expect it. She was standing behind a folding table, sleeves rolled up, laughing as she tried to stack cans that kept tumbling over. "Looks like they don't want to cooperate," I said. She looked up, smiled, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, the world felt quieter. From that day on, volunteering became the highlight of my week. Emma had a way of making everyone feel seen. She remembered names, asked about people's kids, listened like their stories mattered, because to her, they did. I admired her kindness first, then everything else followed. Over time, we became inseparable in that gentle, unspoken way. Coffee after shifts. Long walks through the park. Late-night talks about dreams we were afraid to say out loud. She told me about growing up in a small town, about her fear of failing, about how she sometimes gave too much of herself to others. I never told her I loved her. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I was terrified of ruining what we had. Emma started dating someone else the following year. A decent guy, from what I could tell. I smiled, said I was happy for her, and meant it, at least partially. Kindness sometimes looks like swallowing your own heartbreak so someone else can smile freely. When that relationship ended, she leaned on me. I stayed. Always stayed. Friends told me I was being foolish, that I was the nice guy waiting in the wings. But I didn't see it that way. Loving her, even quietly, felt like enough. Until the night she called me crying. I rushed over to her apartment, heart pounding. She had just lost her job, budget cuts, sudden and impersonal. She sat on the floor, surrounded by unopened mail, eyes red and tired. "I don't know what I'm doing, Daniel," she whispered. I sat beside her and said the only honest thing I could. "You don't have to know right now. You're allowed to rest." Something shifted then. She leaned into my shoulder, and for a moment, I thought, this is it. But I stayed silent again. Weeks passed. Emma started rebuilding, piece by piece. New job interviews. Smiles returning. Life moving forward. And I felt something terrifying creeping in, the possibility that I might lose my chance forever. That's what brought me to the bridge that night. She was late, which only made my nerves worse. I practiced the words in my head, "I love you. I always have." They sounded simple, but my chest felt like it might burst. When Emma finally arrived, slightly out of breath, she smiled apologetically. "Sorry, traffic was a mess." "It's okay," I said, swallowing hard. "I'm glad you're here." We leaned against the railing, watching the water reflect city lights like broken stars. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I took a breath so deep it felt like jumping off a cliff. "Emma," I said, my voice barely steady, "there's something I need to tell you. I should have said it a long time ago." She turned to face me, her expression soft but curious. "I love you," I said. Not in a dramatic way. Just, quietly, consistently. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to complicate your life. But I can't keep pretending it doesn't matter. The words hung between us, trembling. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she smiled, sadly, gently, and said something I never expected. Why didn't you say sooner? My heart dropped. What? She shook her head, letting out a small laugh that sounded like relief. I thought I imagined it. All those years you showed up, listened, stayed when it wasn't easy. I kept waiting for you to say something. I didn't want to pressure you, I said. Or lose you. You never pressured me, she replied softly. You protected me. But you forgot to protect yourself. That was the moment of realization, the unexpected twist I never saw coming. My silence hadn't been selfless the way I told myself it was. It was fear dressed up as kindness. Emma reached for my hand. Do you know how rare it is to be loved patiently? She asked. I just wish you'd trusted me with the truth. I felt tears sting my eyes. I was afraid you didn't feel the same. She smiled, this time brighter. I always did. I was just afraid you didn't. We laughed then, the kind of laugh that comes from finally setting something heavy down. Our relationship didn't magically become perfect after that night. Love isn't a movie montage. It took work, learning to speak honestly, to ask instead of assume, to choose courage over comfort. But it was real. Built on years of kindness, not just attraction. Months later, we were back at the food pantry together, side by side again. Emma squeezed my hand as we handed out groceries, her smile just as warm as the day we met. On the drive home, she rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Promise me something." What? Next time your heart knows something, don't wait years to say it. I nodded. I promise. Because here's what I learned, kindness doesn't mean disappearing yourself. Selflessness doesn't require silence. Sometimes the most humane, compassionate thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to speak honestly, even when your voice shakes. And if you're lucky, the person you've been brave enough to love will look at you and say, "Why didn't you say sooner?"